Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Creating Appealing Characters. This is week 8, and this is the end. We finish everything this week, all of it. So, we're going to be putting the final touches on everything and going back over our entire model, trying to apply what we've learned so far, and just kind of hitting the whole thing all over from different spots and, correcting the things that we didn't have enough time to spend in the previous weeks and hopefully pushing everything more and more closer to the concept and towards a finished character. So the last 10% of our model can take a lot of effort. It can take, just as much effort as the other 90%. Starting with your sphere or any kind of base shape and sculpting up from scratch, it seems like you cover a lot of miles pretty quickly. And it's definitely like a rewarding and fast process. And getting down into the nitty gritty of your model and really tuning everything and perfecting all of your angles and your forms and your breaks and your planes is the part that takes the longest. So it's well worth your effort to put that time in now. So this week we're really going to focus on tying everything together to make our model sing. So we'll go ahead and get started with the lecture this week. I'm going to talk about how I finished up the posing, and we'll get into some poly painting and things like that to kind of put some finishing touches on our character. All right, so here we go. Previously, we took our character from most of the way modeled to most of the way posed. We wanted to get the broad strokes of our pose in there without focusing too much on clothing details and things like that, because we know that, using Transpose Master, you're going to mangle a lot of details, and that's okay. A lot of proportional things will come to light as we start to pose things around, and you'll see the strengths and some of the downfalls of when you try to match a pose to a 2D drawing. So, some of those things will change and evolve as we go, but I want to talk about finishing up our pose. I'm going to show you a progression of files and just talk about kind of the major things that happened in each of them as I got to this state. So this is about as close as I'm going to get to final pose for this class. And that's just the pose. Like, I haven't gone in and done any of the detail work on the cloth. There's still some sculptural stuff that I can get done. But just to kind of step through the two different versions there, you can see it's a lot of proportional changing and just kind of general adjustments, sharpening things up, making sure that my limbs and stuff are the right length, and just trying to get some of the cute back into this, and some of the like the big feet and the larger hands and head that are in the concept. We're starting to kind of come out of this character. So this hand wasn't really working for me, so I had to kind of reconfigure it a little bit, and that's where stuff starts to come off of the model or the model sheet. Things start to change a little bit away from what's happening in the concept, and that's okay, because I think that this character all in all still feels very much like the character that's in the drawing. And as long as I'm not changing who this character fundamentally is, and that this pose is still coming across the way that it should, you should be in a good place. So how did I get to this point so far, and what was I thinking about? The most important thing is keeping your character looking like the character in your artwork. So you can use your sort of supplementary knowledge, the things that we've talked about in this class, to help improve the character as you translate it into 3D, but keeping the personality, the general stance, and just the presence that your character, or that the character in the concept has, is kind of your priority as a modeler. And then everything else is just your skills coming to play to fill in the gaps. So moving on down, one of the things to keep in mind is just overall shape, carry through and follow through. So if I've got my forearm kind of has this football triangle shape to it, I just want to make sure that as I rotate around in space that I'm still getting that shape. Just like we did on the cheeks when we were sculpting on the face, we wanted to make sure that we were getting, a roundness that was carrying through that silhouette as we rotated around. So, rely on the shadows that you see in your material to sort of help influence that stuff. But no real fancy tricks as I got to this point. It was really just a lot of experimenting with new shapes as I went along, and just making sure that my arm length stayed like the same length. So in order to do that, I would often just duplicate my body over and kind of line up elbow to shoulder, make sure that those arms were the same length, make sure that my legs and stuff felt like they were the same length. That becomes very important, and it's easy to lose track of that. So, a lot of that kind of stuff. But then, just mostly making sure that the straights and curves that are in my concept and in my neutral model are carrying through into this pose. So I didn't use any kind of fancy sculpting or anything like that. It was just a lot of move brush and then going through, and I added a couple details to clothings. Like I've added this seam here, which would be a pain for me personally to do in ZBrush. I re-imported all the buttons and stuff that I mangled in my original transpose. And now I'm ready to add thickness to these different pieces of cloth and add my wrinkles and stuff, all the kind of extra details that are sort of um, nice to have at the end, but not the kind of stuff that we want to focus on until right about now. So I think we should move on to some other details now, like posing up the face and then adding color and then calling this thing done. So I think one important thing to keep in mind with the face is that we want to avoid any kind of twinning or just dead kind of dull expressions and stuff like that. So even if your character has a fairly symmetrical expression in your concept, anything that you can do to sort of break that symmetry up a little bit and give just a little bit of life to your character, I think is going to be really important. If you look at Mickey over there on the left, all his eyes are drawn the same size, and everything is kind of doing exactly the same. He's got the symmetrical body pose. His face is very just kind of frozen. His eyebrows are at the exact same height. And you see this a lot on CG characters, like this one. So, right now I haven't sculpted out a pose for this character yet, and she doesn't have a super complex pose. It's just enough to give her a little bit of an interest in the concept art. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. So let's see. Let's take a look. What is our character's face doing? So she's kind of got one brow down, one brow up, maybe squinting her eyes a little bit, and then we can get a little bit of asymmetry in the mouth too. So sculpting the face and getting some of the posing going on in the face is all about subtlety in my experience. So we want to, not just go crazy moving stuff around, just kind of make small adjustments here and there and then see what you're coming up with. There's no wrong way to do this, but instead of starting with moving the actual brow meat around, I'm going to try and line up my brows first, the actual brow geometry. So this one here is really arched up a lot. You can kind of think of your brows as driving your eyes a little bit too. So not all your expressions are going to be driven from just your eyebrows moving up and down, which is kind of a thing that I see a lot with stylized characters, especially 2D stylized characters, where like all the expression comes from just the brow. Um, so there's a lot more expression coming from the eye shape actually than you might be aware of. So we're gonna kind of try and get some of that going too. Let's move that brow way up, kind of not exactly matching our characters drawing one for one, but getting close. I don't like to always just overlay everything because then I feel like I'm not really getting to put my stamp on it. I want to be the one to mess it up or make it better. Let's be positive. All right, so maybe something like that. That gives us a lot of information about how far some of the spans on the face are going to have to move. So let's see. We can go ahead and start to position some of that stuff now. It might be a good idea to polygroup off different areas if you don't want to be able to affect them, or this is an excellent time to make use of masking. If I don't really want to affect that eye region, I might do something like that. And then I just happen to know that my brow kind of more or less lines up with this span on my face. So let's get that roughly into place. You know, if your character has a lot of loose skin or maybe tends to be more realistic, you might get some extra bunching or something going on, like forehead wrinkles or something like that. You know, for this character, let's see, we can get maybe a little bit of that in there. And since I have my subdivision levels in here already, I might as well just make use of those now. So I might consider, you know, just sculpting up a little bit here. And maybe clay isn't the best brush for this. I'm going to use my standard brush to just give myself a little bit of some flesh moving around up there. A combination of standard and the damn standard or any kind of mech brush, just to get some sort of flesh being, you know, pushed up right there. I don't know if I'll end up liking that or not. Fill in a little bit of this. So one of the things I take a look at a lot while I'm sculpting a face, especially in the eyes, is your eyes also have kind of a line of action to them. And what I mean is if we follow just the underside line of these brows, we get a sweep that comes across like this, and then there's this disconnect area here. But what's really happening there is this invisible line is being drawn by your mind. And so you see this brow come across, there's a break, and then you kind of want to pick it up again. So I always think of the brows as one continuous shape. If you can sort of draw a smooth curve between them, I think that your brow shape is a lot more readable. So that's something to keep in mind when posing brows around. And the eyes too. If you kind of look at, you know, my character's eye over here, from corner to inside corner to outside corner, it creates a sweep. You know, and it might not just always be along that bottom line of the eye, but there is this sweep that kind of runs through these two eyeballs. So, you know, I use that to sort of make sure that my eyes are round enough on the head, and also that they're reading correctly. Just something to think about as you are sculpting. So I'm just kind of, I go really slow when I'm doing face posing because I don't want to have to redo stuff. If you're gonna try something, you know, different, or kind of make a leap of faith with your sculpt, then just save it, you know, so that you're not correcting huge changes. Like, I don't know, that might be a little bit too much with this brow here. I don't know if I notice it that much. It kind of helps emphasize the fact that this is up higher. And actually, maybe if I go and add some, I'm going to block off this or mask off this eye socket, so I don't want that anymore. Let's do the other side of the face real quick. So this stuff is all coming down. This brow meat is going to be coming down at an angle. It starts to overlap the eye socket slightly, which means that it's compressing and it's building up as it's coming in like this. Your brow, when you squint like that, it never just goes straight down. So we want to make sure that, let's see, you know, your brow is going to kind of come down and over a little bit. So I'm going to do that now too. Just pull this stuff over a tiny bit, because what's happening is it's sort of pushing down like this. The worst green arrow I've ever drawn. So it kind of pushes down and at an angle, which is what causes that bunching and that furrowing in your brow. What I'm going to do is try to find a way that I can indicate that without going crazy at having like a huge, you know, ultra kind of realistic looking brow detail, because I don't want that. I don't want a lot of anatomy going on in the face. So maybe something, you know, where I start to kind of build up that line, hop back and forth between subtools all the time. Yeah, it's okay. It's just gonna go really subtle, I think, with this one. Maybe get a little bit of that creasing. So I'll go in and I'll really kind of stick in that crease and then fade it off a lot towards the outsides, so that we just get kind of, fades in from a smoothness of the brow into that hard crease there and then fades off on both sides of that hard crease. You know, it's okay to back some of that stuff off. If your character doesn't have a lot of facial anatomy in the sculpt, or in the concept, I should say, like this one, then don't put it in the sculpt. Stands to reason, I think. Pull some of this out. Just check the curvature of my forehead and stuff. Feels pretty good. Just make sure that these brows aren't floating in the middle of nowhere. All that just for brows. I think they feel okay though. I don't love this crease up here. So maybe I'll kind of definitely back that off towards the sides, but just kind of smooth it out a little bit overall. Fix some planarity stuff. I'm going to hide these lashes because now I'll do the actual eyelids, which aren't going to be too different. I'm going to do this at pretty low resolution. It's a great advantage of having multiple subdivision levels is that we can grab fewer points to control larger areas. If you don't have a mirror next to your desk, you should probably get one. Just take a look at yourself while you do this kind of stuff. Just pay attention to what is happening to the surrounding areas. So an expression is not just purely the elements that are making that expression. So like your eye squinting like this is not just your eye, it's also taking some of that cheek with it too. There's a compression upwards and downwards. I don't want to give her too much like bag underneath her eye either. It could be handy too, depending on what your character's eye direction is, to get in there and put some sort of a placeholder or even just a finished texture on that eye. Just paint something on there so that we can kind of see what's going on, where she's looking. That could be handy. I find that with the curvature of eyelids is changes a lot depending on which angle you're looking at them. So your eyelids might look perfectly smooth and round from one side, but then you look at them from underneath and you get kind of this wobbly shape. Luckily these eyelids are perfect, so I don't have to deal with them. Just kidding. Nothing is ever perfect. There's always lots of stuff that I want to change. I think that's totally natural. If you're completely happy with everything that you make, then that's awesome. I'm happy for you. I was going to say you're wrong, but it's not true. All right, so we've got one eye that's compressed a little bit. Now this eye I want to open up just a bit, and I'm kind of going to shift the apex of this lid line too. I'm going to mask off the socket because I don't want to really affect that. And by changing, maybe opening up this lid a little bit over here, then I'm able to sort of affect eye direction. Hopefully when I draw in my eyes now, they'll be it'll kind of make sense, because your eyelids do shift, of course, as you look at different things. Yeah, so maybe this eye's just open up a little bit more. It doesn't take much to, get some interesting look going on your face. Really just breaking up the symmetry a little bit is all you need to do. If you're planning on sculpting your character out in like a crazy expression or something, that's a different matter, I suppose. But we're just going to focus on the simple for now. And then if you need to go and do more, if you need to, really have a pushed expression or something, if that's just what you need for your character, then you've got a good foundation and you can just build it up using all of the techniques that we've talked about for the body sculpting. Just starting low, starting simple, get the broad strokes in, add detail later, and then work up in subdivision levels. I always work as low as possible for as long as possible. Let's see. I think what I'm going to do is add some subdivisions to these eyes. Let's get just some dots in there so that I can see. I'll fill that with white. Grab my black crayon here. Got some little bumps on my eyes. I hate that. All right, so now I can go to my RGB. Got my drag dot, turn my focal shift to -100. Now I've got a eyeball that I can drag on. It's a little hard to see with everything being totally black, so I'm going to turn on my color. And let's see, it feels a little bit large, a little too small, maybe something like that. It's a little too big too. Try like 74, 75. Oh, that's way too big. All right, so try turning on dynamic brush size. That could be handy because no matter what size you choose, it'll be the same at whatever zoom level you're at, which is nice. That doesn't feel terrible. Let's see, maybe just slightly bigger. I'm gonna go 58. Totally arbitrary number for anyone watching because it will be completely different on your character based on scale. And I like to just tack those eyes on one at a time. How's that read? It's okay. Some stuff going on I don't love. Part of it has to do with the lids on that left eye. So let's try and fix that now. So we've got the compression from the brow, but we also have that lid shift from the eye looking in a different direction. So I'm pushing that up back into that brow just a little bit. Here's a good example of that lid getting kind of wavy from different angles here. So I'd like to just look at my character from all different angles. Make sure that that is feeling good. Sometimes it might be helpful to add some color here and there. I think that that really helps. And as usual, those lashes are going to be super important too. And so now that I've kind of done some posing on my eyes, I'll have to readjust what's going on with these lashes. The eyes haven't changed a whole lot, but and I've kept these lashes very low res right now, and I can maybe add some thickness to them or something later, but it's nice because it becomes very easy to just position them, change the angle of stuff, change the width of stuff very fast, very easy. I like to keep that black graphic element of the lash in there for as long as possible, so I just kind of am cheating it by continuing to push this lash all the way back into the eye. Like it's connecting with the top lid, but then just kind of going all the way along that top plane. And what that gives me is this cool black silhouette, just like it would be in a drawing probably. And, having a more graphic shape on your eye can be, not always, but can be more beneficial for like the read of your eye from far away. I feel like it's pretty easy to tell, even from this distance, what's happening with her eyes. So this one you can see has changed quite a bit. It's really a lot more open compared to the other one. I don't know if it's too far. Just go with it for now. That same treatment of pushing it back against the lid. Give myself a read. It's alright. I think if I use the graphicness of these lashes to sort of help the angle of my eye, you can do that too. So if it's thicker, kind of out on the outside here, close, kind of lining up the thickness with where the eye direction is going, just slightly. Just little things to help influence. Oops, where am I? Okay. Just noticing some flatness in that plane. And then maybe you like what the shape of your lashes are doing, so you go back and correct your lids a little bit. That's feeling all right. Kind of looking at my forehead here. Go back up in subdivision levels. I feel like the crunch or like the compression on this brow isn't really reading the way that I want it to. Pull it over some, pull this over some. Yeah, I think that's working okay. Let's get the rest of the face pose in there. So her mouth is almost all the way there, just based on, it's a fairly symmetrical mouth shape. What I am going to do is kind of raise one side of her mouth a little bit, so she's got a little bit of kind of an asymmetrical smile. Just gonna kind of grab that corner point, push that up some, maybe open up the lips a little bit so we see some more of her teeth. Kind of handled that expression in the neutral. Just remember as that mouth corner goes up, all these cheek mass is going to be affected even if just slightly. We're pulling that up. And maybe to counterbalance it a little bit, just kind of adjusting the contours of her face a little bit, that silhouette, that jaw. And then going up to a higher subdivision level to start adding some sculpting, fixing my surfaces a little bit. So this is definitely a character that I would finesse this expression a little bit so that she's not too extreme. Like even you see, like I haven't made drastic changes to her face, but it's already like a pretty big change. Like let's go back to, like you can see those changes happen. It's pretty small, but it makes a big difference on this character to me anyway. Just small stuff, and then just a little bit of that asymmetry, bringing in the color of the eyes, the brows, the lashes. Really helps put a little bit of life into her overall. So maybe we'll revisit the face again after I do some coloring. But she's looking pretty good, I think. Pretty good overall. You can add some thickness to those brows if you need, or the lashes and stuff if you need to. Make them read a little bit better in space, especially if you're going to bring this into another program. Render it out or something. Just save yourself from having to turn double-sided on or whatever program you use for rendering. Actually, speaking about using another program, it is always a good idea, just because ZBrush does not have a 3D camera, just every once in a while, merge all your subtools together, export that to another package like Maya, something with an actual camera with controls that you can mess with, and see what is going on. Just make sure that all of your pieces are reading in perspective. I notice everything, or I don't notice everything. I notice one or two things every time I do that, something that I need to change. Like the arms feel too short, or especially from one angle, the arms might feel too short. Now, we're not cheating our poses to camera because we're making a sculpture here, but it is handy to have that perspective. Imagine, we want to know what this would look like if it was printed out. So it can get deceiving, the perspective mode in ZBrush. Alright, so that's feeling okay for now. That's kind of a nice big change. I think that she looks really good from our hero angle here. So we can move on to doing some other stuff like finalizing the clothing and finishing up our color and all that stuff. Alright, it's time to move on to finishing up our clothing. And I'm going to start with the shirt here. And you can see that I've kept everything single-sided so far. So it's all single-sided, it's one resolution, it's very low res. And I'm just going to go in and start adding some extra cloth details and stuff. And just like with the face and some of the stuff that we showed last week, I don't want to go too crazy with my cloth and adding detail and wrinkles and stuff like that. So, I kind of focus on laying out my grid patterns for the clothing first and just making sure that things are compressing where they should and they're stretching apart where they should, because that's going to help when I start to subdivide this. So first of all, speaking of subdividing, let's think about what is the goal with this clothing. We're going to need subdivision levels because right now it's all too low res, but we're also going to need thickness. So there's an order in which you should probably do that if you want to get the best results. And for me, that's adding thickness first and then going in and adding my extra detail, because that way I'll have my workable subdivision levels, and hopefully I can, just keep the wrinkling and stuff on the external surface here. So I'm going to do that now. And in order to do that, just like I showed last time, I'm going to go down here to my display properties. Right now I've got double turned on, so I can see both sides of that. I'm going to turn that off and hit flip. So now my shirt is flipped inside out. Turn double back on since we know that the shirt has been reversed now. And then back up in geometry here, I've got my edge loops. I'm just going to use this to add thickness to the whole thing. Let's start with 0.03. I'm going to turn my loops down to 1, maybe 2 loops. No polish, no bevel. I'm going to turn on ignore groups, otherwise it's going to separate all of these objects. Let's just hit panel loops and see what that gives me. So that gives me something pretty good. Don't mind that at all. Actually, that's not terrible. We might as well just go with that. I'm going to try one size thicker, 0.04. It's just a little bit thicker. I kind of like it. So I had decided that I do kind of want a bevel profile. I'm going to reset this. Just pull up this piece here in the middle. What does that give me if I change my bevel now? So that gives me it bumps up that little single span in the middle. Let's just change that. I just want it to stick slightly out so it's not totally flat. It gets a little bit round now. Cool. So now I've got that going for me. Let's start adding some extra little details, some folds and things. I'm going to go around the edges of my cloth really quick and just kind of fix this connection point. Make sure that that thickness feels like it's up against her skin and not interpenetrating too much. I want to see that lip. I want to see the light catch off that lip of the shirt. It's going to help with that readability of what's going on there. I'm doing all this with the goal in mind of deleting or somehow hiding the interior faces here because I don't need them. There's going to be a lot of extra junk on the inside that will slow down renders, especially as I start to subdivide this outfit up. Alright, I'm just going to make sure that we're getting flush against her skin from all angles. Remember, I want to see this type of detail hit the skin or hit the underlying forms and start to curve away. We don't want to see anything that looks too much like it's interpenetrating or something like that. So it hits and curves away, but we still don't see like a gap back into the clothing if we can avoid it and still make it feel natural. So just cleaning up some areas. I'm going to use my normal move brush with topological turned on. I just want to kind of lift up some of these edges. I'm getting pretty specific with some of these. We might never see this character up close like this. But if I fix it now, I'll be able to sleep at night. And I just use this shirt to kind of approximate some volume here. Fill in this waistband. Alright, cool. So, now, let's take a look at my poly groups here. And I've got this exterior blue poly group that's generated as a result of our panel loops. And then I've got all these old inside poly groups, which I don't want to affect these when I'm sculpting. So what I'm going to do is hide all these interior loops, the sleeves and stuff. And I'm going to keep them in here for now, maybe delete them later. Alright, here's what I'm going to do. Let's just leave them. And now it's time to start adding some subdivisions. So before I do that, I'm just going to duplicate this shirt so I have a placeholder and I can come back to it. Now it's time to start saving, versioning up. It's always a good idea. Let's add a couple subdivision levels to the shirt. So I've added 3 subdivision levels. Now just with my standard brush, I'm going to go ahead and turn on back face masking, which you can find under brush. Down here into auto masking, there's an option for back face masking. And the reason for that is now if I still have my eyeball brush. So now, you know, any sculpting that I do on this shirt is hopefully not going to be affecting the interior. So that way we can get a lot of our sculptural detail of all of our folds and wrinkles and stuff without messing up the inside of this shirt and pulling a bunch of geometry forward when we don't want it, so on and so forth. So I'm just using the standard brush for now. And don't forget to make use of your masking whenever you can, so I can mask off that inside flap. I'm just going to stay real simple with these folds as I go. Kind of use the standard brush to pull them out and smooth out the resultant edges. And then you can kind of go over it with a sharper edge brush to sort of help define those breaks a little bit. And your masking, by the way, let's just see if I really caused some issues there. That back face masking is brush dependent, so you'll have to turn it on for every brush that you use. So I'm using inflate to kind of get some extra volume in there. It's really easy to get too carried away with some wrinkling and stuff, so try to restrict myself from getting too detailed in any one area, but you're probably looking at this and thinking, not a problem. Doesn't look too detailed at all. Just worry about getting like too noodly in little areas where they shouldn't be. This is a good time to use reference, but also a good time to talk about compression and stretching a little bit on clothing. So you'll notice one side of her body, we're getting a lot of compression because she's kind of leaning into it. On the other side, we are getting a stretch. So, all the clothing over here is kind of being pushed up against her body a little bit more. There might be more of this sort of these longer stretching lines. Maybe not quite like that. I think something along this line will work for me. This isn't maybe exactly what I want to do. It's something I would have to spend some more time on, but for now, I think for the purposes of kind of showing what I want to do here, this works just fine. What I'm trying to do really is just use these folds and wrinkles to show a little bit more directionality in the sculpt. It's feeling a little bit too complex, I think, overall. Some of this stuff just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense for this level of character, this level of detail, I think, on this character. Also, I think I've got AccuCurve turned on, which is really messing with my move brush, so I'll shut that off. Alright, so we're getting something. There's a kind of the detail level is all over the place right now, so that's something I'll want to revisit, I think, and check on some of this surface. It's getting a little too complex, and some of these like compression and stretching lines aren't feeling exactly what I want them to do, but it's a process, just like anything else. Kind of keep going back and forth. It takes a while. It doesn't feel terrible, but it feels a little uneven. Just like the level of detail and the level of stylization. Readdress. Alright, let's call that fine for now, and we can always come back to it later. I just want to get something in there, some sort of visual representation of that compression, because that helps with this hip compression going out like that. So down here, let's grab this, maybe divide up these pants a little bit. Before I do that, I like to make sure that I duplicate the pants first. Hide the old one. And these pants don't have an interior. I just modeled them in a different program. so don't have to worry about that too much. And I'm going to add a couple subdivision levels to those. Just make sure that I've got my dynamic subdivision turned off, so I'm seeing actual subdivisions. And then for these, let's just get some of these wrinkles that naturally happen when your leg is bending. I think just adding enough detail that we get an impression of what's going on with these the compression lines and stretch lines. Think about it in those terms, just what's compressing and what's stretching. Everything else is kind of irrelevant. For cloth, unless you have some sort of a fancy sculpted detail that needs to go in there. That's more or less the way that I kind of do cloth. You could do some extra stretching and compression around seam lines and stuff too, but I think once I throw some color on what I've got here, it'll be kind of lost, and we can add that stuff later too. So, add as much detail as you feel like you need to at any given point here. I'll just keep going like that around the whole model as I do my cloth. All right, so I wouldn't call that done for clothing. I would definitely keep going, sculpting some extra detail and probably paying, just spending a little bit more time on it than I did here. But, it's just important to make sure that the clothing feels like cloth and that it's got some breakup to it. And that it's not just like a really CG simple piece that's kind of sticking on top. So any kind of extra detail and character that you can give it is good. Try to get everything that's in the concept and then see what you can improve on. And then, we can move on to adding, any kind of extra pieces like you want. If you want to add some stitching or any seam lines or anything like that, this would be a good time to do that too. So let's throw some color on this thing. Okay, let's move on to adding a little bit of color into this character. So if your concept is already in color, then that's a great way to grab some of the shades that you need. So I'm just going to go ahead and start there by opening up my spotlight, grabbing some color. I'm just going to go around to every piece and go up to the highest subdivision level. In fact, I'll just do all high right now on my subtools. We always want to paint on our highest subdivision levels. And I'm sure I'm going to be coming back and adjusting some of these materials. Let's see. Instead of this AL11, let's go back to Zero Paint. And you can see I've accidentally applied a material to every single subtool. So choose flat color if you've done that. Go up to Z plugin, down to Subtool Master, and then you've got a fill. Where is that? Fill visible subtools. I'm going to click that and fill everything with material. I'm going to fill the whole thing with that flat color. That'll just wipe out any material that you have on there. Now you can choose a different material and it'll show up. Turn on shadows and turn my wax preview up just a little bit. Give myself a little bit of visual interest there. Obviously that is a little bit too orange. So I'm going to turn off the color on the body and then just kind of adjust it over here in the color slider until I get something that feels more correct. Let's go with that for now. So I'm going to fill that object now. Just make sure that I have RGB turned on. Fill that object, RGB set to 100. And I'm just going to go through and kind of select some different pieces here, fill them. Belt buckle, still need to add some thickness to that. Or the belt loops, I should say. That change the saturation on that just a little bit. It feels better. Shirt buttons, gloves, her hair. All right, starting to get there. So just adding solid colors, I think right off helps a lot. Things are starting to look cooler already. And now we can kind of go in and finish up. I tend to stay very kind of basic with color. I find that it's really easy to let that get in the way too fast. So I'll let's tackle the skin real quick. And what I like to do for skin is give it a little bit of a texture. So I'm going to use standard brush for all my painting. And with RGB mode on, I'm going to turn the RGB down a little bit though. I'm going to turn my dynamic brush size on so that it's always the same size in relation to the model, and we don't need that concept art anymore. I'm going to sample the color, and again, make sure that you're on your highest subdivision level because otherwise you'll get weird artifacting. I'm just going to change this slightly more red, just kind of shift the color a little bit, and then go into my alpha channel, or my alpha and my stroke. Actually, I'm going to choose color spray, and then change the amount of variance down a little bit. I don't want super variant. Just kind of paint on my model, see what's happening there. Okay, let's change my alpha to this stippling dot kind of thing. So you see as I'm painting onto the model there, it's getting just a little bit of a texture breakup, just like a little bit of yellows and purples and stuff in there too. I kind of like the way that it does that, and you can get a better exact um, look based on tweaking some of these things a little bit. So I might turn that intensity variance down a little bit so it's not quite so varied and colorful. So I'll just try to hit a lot of the model with that. Let's just experiment here. So kind of painting on this color, and it's really splotchy. There's a lot of weird purple and yellow and stuff like that. Definitely not my final paint job on here, but it's starting to give me something that feels a little bit interesting. Like it's not just like a flat pink. Do some of that up here too. Let's just do all of her visible skin. So maybe up here where it's more visible, we'll kind of reduce the size a little bit so that that frequency gets a little bit more fine. Kind of go back and hit some other areas with that fine frequency. All right, so that's looking kind of strange and plague victimy, right? So I'll just take now kind of I'll just sample from the skin here, change my RGB intensity down pretty low, and then just hit fill object a couple times. And that kind of brings everything into the same color space a little bit. So you just keep tapping that, you can kind of look what's going on. And that just kind of dialed everything back a lot. I don't know if that's a totally necessary step, but I like that it just gives me a little bit of a breakup on my skin there. And now I can go in and I'm just going to turn my stroke to spray instead, and grab like a darker red and start kind of choosing some areas to highlight and start to actually do some painting. So these knees, as per the concept and just the way that I normally paint, I'm going to kind of just go around the model and paint in some areas that are going to have a little bit more red in them, like the knees and the elbows. I'll kind of do the face all at once, but yeah, something like that. Maybe a little bit too red. That's okay, because we can do that same trick to kind of knock everything back. So easier to go too far first. She's a redhead, so she's going to have a lot of freckles and stuff, so it's okay to break up some of that skin, get some kind of interesting textures going on there. I won't do the whole skin uniformly like that. I'll just kind of alternate between, grab this red and then hit V to switch your color, and then grab the skin color, and then you can kind of just like press V now to alternate back and forth. So add some red up here, across here, and press V. Now I've got my skin texture. Get rid of some of what I just did. Yikes. All right, so if I could just go back to regular dots and just kind of once over all of this stuff to get rid of it. You can also use the smooth brush with just color turned on, just RGB, and that'll actually work like a smooth out your colors and blend between them a little bit. Sometimes I'll do that. So let's see, grab my reds again. Now I'm not using a special stroke anymore, just an alpha. Just pull back and take a look. So the reason we paint on the highest subdivision level is because polypainting is essentially vertex painting. So what we're doing is we're assigning a color value to every point on your model. So your sculpt resolution is in effect your texture resolution as well, at least for poly painting. Later on, you can convert it to a texture map and apply it to a lower res object if you want to do that. All right, let's do some work on this face. Not that. So kind of added a lot of weird extra detail to this face. So I'll just I'm going to stay pretty simple as I do this face here and kind of hit the cheeks and the nose area with a little bit more red. Ears, just kind of this band all across her face. Sample from more clear areas of the skin here to kind of get rid of some of the more obvious marks, blemishes, and things that I'm seeing. So yeah, I kind of hit the cheeks and the nose with the red, and then from there, maybe just sample the skin tone to dial some of that stuff back some. I think she probably does a lot of work outside, so I'm gonna hit the bottom of that nose with a little bit of a lighter color, and then maybe hit just trying some stuff. Maybe she's got a little bit of sun. All right, let's darken up these eyes a little bit. Let's just grab that skin tone and change that to like a darker color. And I'm actually going to turn that alpha off. Just hit the inside of that eye socket with a little bit darker color, a little bit of purple in there for some shadowing. You can paint however you want. If you want to add, kind of build everything up in layers. I've seen a lot of people do that. They build it up with like greens and yellows and blues. Totally valid. You can do that if you want to, but I'm going to keep this pretty simple for this character. Just kind of hit a couple major colors. This is what I do most of the time. Assuming that this is going to go on for cleanup or something like that, we're far away from our final color at this point. This is kind of just to show and get some feedback. Potentially an art director or a client that you might be doing this work for. I'm going to go ahead and polygroup these lips like that. That makes it so that I can mask them off like that. Maybe blur my mask a little bit. And then Control H to hide the mask. And then we'll start filling those lips in. Going to shrink that mask, blur it a lot. Control H. And then just use the brush to sort of get that curl over on the bottom. You see that it kind of is filling in a lot of this area back here too. We don't totally want. Clear my mask and just kind of manually fix. Just manually fix it. And sometimes I'll go in and just darken up the upper lip just a little. So let's see. We're looking a little bit red overall. Too much sun. Kind of dial that back a little bit, just paint it out where I don't want it, and then add darker colors in where I do want them darker. I think maybe making that eye socket color feel too much like a makeup or something might have been a bit much. Dial that back. I like to make it feel a little bit darker than the surrounding area. Really, this is our read distance, so we kind of want to make sure that that's working well first. I'm going to try doing something like masking off the inside of the eyelid, the eye socket there. Just give me a little bit darker around the lid. The darker you can kind of get it around the eyes, I think, the better it reads. So this will be a good time to use that smooth brush with RGB only turned on. But in my case, I'm just kind of painting out that resultant line from hitting the fill all button. All right, let's paint some eyeballs up a little bit. So I kind of have like a little bit of a blur on that edge. So what I can do is go down into masking. Got some options for masking here. You can mask by color. So we can try and mask by intensity and see what that does just as a test. So that is masking out the black in the eye. So you can kind of just mask by intensity, reverse your mask, and then fill that with black a couple times to really kind of get a cleaner edge on that eye. And then I'm going to turn off my alpha, turn my focal shift down a little bit, find my eye color. I still have that mask on, so I'll just keep that on because that's handy. Just do some simple eye coloring. Just get that green in there. This is why having an eye texture might be a really good thing, because then you can just apply that as a stamp. So I really don't want to make her feel wall-eyed. So I'll just kind of apply this all in stages. Pupils to be about the right size. You could do this with drag dot to get a perfect circle, but who's got time for that? Sometimes it's nice to fade the top of that off with a little bit of black. Then I'll go back in with my green. For the eyes too, you might want to choose like a toy plastic or even paint in some highlights. Let's try painting some highlights in to her eyes. Change my Z intensity to 100. Paint some highlights in. That looks kind of cool. It's a little bit more reliable maybe than having the highlights from the material coming along. So I kind of just apply this same technique to the whole character, and so I'll go in and add scuffy boots and things like that. Try and get a little bit of material rendered out when you can, but it's not really hard. It's not a lot of steps to it or anything like that. You can definitely spend more time than I am. But you see, I'll just paint in kind of a patina on things here and there where there's a recess or a crease. Things get darker. And when there is a wide open space or something that I want to kind of emphasize, I'll highlight it a little bit. So always want to make sure that stuff is reading well from far away. So let's take a look at the hair real quick. Something I want to show you that I use to paint hair frequently. So if I turn on my, let's see, I've got my brush set to RGB, and I want to be able to paint on this hair pretty normally, like I would paint it on, any part of the body or anything like that. So what I'll do is go to my brush, down here to auto masking, then turn mask by polygroups all the way up, and then just make sure that your whole hair is auto grouped. And the way what that's going to do now is change my color to a little bit darker. I can now kind of go in and just whichever tube I click on, that's going to be the one that I'm painting on. So I can get some darker root areas without affecting any of the tubes nearby. So I don't have to do it on every single one. I can just get a little bit of a color variance, like a color grade happening in there. I'll do the same thing on these highlighted pieces. Change that to like a slightly lighter orange. And then hit that area. Kind of approximates that anisotropic hair. We start to get something that says that there's some visual interest going on. Fade it off where it gets to where it starts to dip underneath stuff. Doing the auto masking is what makes it so that I don't have to worry about going in and making sure that all the hair pieces are hidden except the one that I'm working on. You can totally do it that way if you want to, but I find it to be very tedious. Anyway, it's getting there. Just kind of keep going in that vein. Maybe do some fancier masking to get some of these recesses. But it's headed in the right direction. Just got to keep with it. Some of these flyaways might just be a little bit lighter or a little bit darker overall. Helps kind of break up that monotony. Anything you can do to help break up that hair a little bit, I think, is really beneficial. That's kind of the way that I tend to approach doing poly paint. Just enough to start to breathe some life into your character and you start to get a feel. It looks a lot more alive and interesting than a gray shaded model, which is kind of the point of this class, is that we want to make our character feel alive and looking cool. So yeah, go ahead and do that with your models and you should be looking pretty good. So now we've come to the end of the 8 weeks in this class, and we've put a lot of time and effort into our characters. Hopefully, you're able to take away some good information from this class. And, I hope that you were able to pick up some valuable skills or workflows that'll help you as you move on to your next project. There's 2 points that I want to touch on. The first is choose your projects wisely. So it's fun to sculpt in 3D. It's fun to, grab a concept and just go to town working on something, but it's easy to get carried away doing that a lot. And then before you know it, you've got a pile of work in progress, projects that are just laying around. So one of the things, a valuable thing that I've learned is choosing what to make and choose for a reason. So, does whatever you're working on, do you have a goal in mind for that? What are you going to try to accomplish by making this? Are you improving yourself as an artist? Are you strengthening yourself in any way by making this? If it's, if you're just making guy with sword number 6, then you probably aren't really pushing yourself artistically. And there's some value in just making stuff that you like to make, for sure. But if you're trying to get into an industry or trying to find your own sort of niche in all of this, then I highly recommend trying to push yourself, or at least choosing one new thing to tackle with every project that you start. So choose your projects wisely. And second, finish stuff. Anything that you do actually choose to start, you should try to commit to finishing it as much as possible. I know that everyone starts out with that intention of finishing things, but it's very easy, like I said, to have just a pile of work in progress projects laying around. So, once you have chosen something, hopefully you've chosen it for a good reason. Finish it. I think that's the best advice that I can give is whether or not it's the best thing you've ever made, getting all the way through something from start to finish is a much, much more valuable lesson than, learning how to take a body from a Z sphere to a sculpted out, anatomy study, which you can do over and over and over. And at the end of the day, that's all you have. You don't have a finished character. So, finishing your work, yeah, definitely builds confidence. You're going to develop your skill set much more quickly. And as you build up a gallery of finished work, people will notice you more and you will gain a reputation and a following as you go forward, which is, probably not the goal of everyone, but it's something that's helpful. And it definitely bolsters your confidence and pushes you to make even more things and even greater things. So in closing, I just want to say thanks for taking this class. I know it's a lot of work, and I hope that I hope the lectures were good and you got a lot out of them. I hope that my instructions and feedback were helpful to you, and that you are able to take some of that stuff and apply it to your next character. And I hope that you'll show me what you come up with too. So good luck on your future endeavors, and thanks again.